Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. So today I wanted to do another installment in my plant profile series. So what my plant profile series is it's going to be a collection of videos that I'm going to put into my plant profile playlist. Say that 5 times fast. So I'm going to put it in the playlist on my channel with the goal of making the playlist a source of inspiration for you all to either learn about new plants or get some ideas of plants that you all can use in your garden. I'm planning to do a video on a different plant, either ones that I know and love and have lots of experience with, or just ones that I'm obsessed with and want more of in my own garden. So stay tuned for more plant profile videos where I focus on a different plant each time. Today, I wanted to do my plant profile on another one of my absolute favorite plants, which is Helen Von Stein lamb's ear. The scientific name is Stachy's byzantina. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I'm gonna try. And this is the otherwise known as the big ears version of lamb's ear. So I am not talking about the silver carpet version where it's the tiny little leaves. That's beautiful as well, but specifically I want to talk about this plant, which is Helen Von Stein. And this is another plant that I lean heavily on in my garden. I find that it thrives in my area. It is such a foolproof, easy plant, and I think it is definitely one that if you're not familiar with it, you should be. So Helen Von Stein lamb's ear, it is of course a lamb's ear, so it has the soft, silvery foliage that is reminiscent of baby lamb's ears, which my kids absolutely love these. You know, they've pet them all the time. It's just one of those beautiful tactile plants that is so nice to have in your garden. The color I think is absolutely beautiful. This silvery foliage pops against other flowers in your garden, both cool and warm flowers, and it also breaks up the monotony of just the basic green leafy color. It really brings something to a garden and it gives it some depth and some interest. I find that this plant is kind of a set it and forget it plant for me. When I plant it in my garden, I really don't have to think about it that often. Sometimes I will have to go under and I will have to clean up the dead leaves. And then in the winter time, if it's raining a lot, I have to deal with the kind of the rotting leaves. But otherwise, I just leave it in my garden and I really don't even think about it. And that is worth its weight in gold, I think. If you can find a plant that you really don't have to pay too much attention to, it is worth it to have in your garden. So this plant is a perennial. It is hardy zones 4 through 9, and it is actually a member of the mint family, which I was surprised to learn. It has a season of interest, they say spring and summer, for the flowers. This plant does get bloom stalks. They're not very pretty though. I don't like the bloom stalks on these, so I will actually go in and I will cut off the bloom stalks, and I will use them in cut flower arrangements. They're kind of neat to have in cut flower arrangements. So even though they say the season of interest is spring and summer, I actually enjoy this plant almost year round. The only time that I don't enjoy this plant is when we've been having lots and lots of rain and the moisture kind of weighs down the fuzzy leaves and almost causes some of the leaves to rot. So I would say that if you live in a very humid environment or a very wet environment that rains often, this might not be the right plant for you, because honestly that's the only time of the year that I don't like how this plant looks. And then I have to go in and I have to take off all the rotting leaves that have been soggy and oversaturated. If you live in a drier zone or a zone that doesn't get, you know, intense water during the summer, intense rain or intense humidity, then this plant is absolutely fabulous. So Helen Von Stein lamb's ear gets 8 to 12 inches tall and 18 to 24 inches wide. And I would even go so far to say as it gets even a little bit bigger than that. And I think that's simply because it thrives in our dry, hot environment. This plant likes full sun to part sun. I honestly don't have this plant in a lot of shade. I mainly put it in full sun spots, but I am planning to put it in my shade garden in the backyard, and I will keep you all updated so that we can all see how it does with a little bit more shade. So the water needs of this plant are low to average moisture. You want to make sure that you put this plant in a spot that's well draining. You don't want it to sit in a spot that's really moist or soggy or gets too much water, because then of course it will rot. But I do have to say that if you live in a hot place, like if you live in a desert environment or even zone 9B like I live and we're in a drought, you do have to make sure that this plant gets enough water. If it doesn't, the leaves will get brown and crispy with the hot summer sun. So I usually water this plant kind of the same way that I water my other perennials. This is different when I tell you guys what size emitter I put on, just know it's going to be different for everybody. But I usually always go with a 1 gallon per hour emitter on this plant. And now if you guys watched my oak tree garden bed installing my irrigation system, what I always say is that if I have a drought tolerant plant, I will put a 1/2 gallon per hour emitter on the plant. And so this plant, I go for a 1 gallon per hour emitter. So you guys can see kind of how I handle it. I don't handle it like a drought tolerant plant, but if you're in a little cooler environment, you probably could handle it like a drought tolerant plant. I hope that makes sense. So Helen Von Stein Lambsyear is not fussy about soil pH. It probably would prefer a more neutral soil, but it will handle more acidic or more alkaline soils. One thing that it doesn't want, it doesn't like rich, fertile soil. So I would not supplement this plant with any fertilizer at any time, because it just doesn't like that. It's kind of like a sedum. So that is one thing that's fabulous about this, is that as soon as you plant it and get the watering all set up, you don't have to worry about this plant at all. Now this plant does spread. The stems of this plant, if they do touch the soil, they will root. They will make its own little roots, so it does spread in areas. It also easily self-seeds if you don't deadhead those bloom stalks and you have a nice environment that it will be happy in. It will actually self-seed and you will have lots and lots and lots of Helen Von Stein Lambsyear. So one of the ways that you can combat that is obviously deadheading and then dividing this plant. This is a plant that you probably should divide every 2 to 4 years, but that's a good way to propagate this plant as well. It propagates very easily by division. I've done it many, many times before. I just dig the whole plant up, I use my hands, I rip it apart, and then I plant 2 new plants. So it's something that you want to do because it does spread, and then it can get, little bare patches in the middle, but just by dividing the plant, you can take care of that problem. And it's only every 2 to 4 years. Helen Von Stein Lambsyear is deer resistant and rabbit resistant. And I have a feeling that's because of the fuzzy leaves. I'm sure that deer and rabbits don't like chewing on this. And so that makes it a really good option for those of you that do deal with deer or rabbit pressure. As for companion plants for this plant, I have to say my absolute favorite combination, and I'm sure you all have heard me say this a million times, is Helen Von Stein Lambsyear paired with Mystic Spire's Blue Salvia. I did my very first plant profile video on Mystic Spire's Blue Salvia, and I will link that video above so you all can check that out if you missed it. But I just think that putting those 2 plants together is perfection. They do really well together, same light requirements, same watering requirements, and I just think they look absolutely beautiful. Another good companion plant for Helen Von Stein's Lambsyear is to put this plant at the base of a shrub, like a rose, or something that maybe doesn't look as beautiful on the very bottom. Because this plant is so low to the ground and it's so fluffy and pillowy, I feel like that this plant is a really good option to cover the stems at the bottom or the branches at the bottom that maybe don't look as beautiful as the top of the plant does. When I was researching this video, I found this incredible photo where the landscape designer used Helen Von Stein Lambsyear as kind of a hedge to hold in what looks like a salvia or possibly a veronica. So really any purple plant would be gorgeous, but oh my goodness, when I saw this picture, I thought, I need to do that somewhere. I think that that is so gorgeous to use it as a hedge, and it's perfect for my environment where this plant just thrives and we really don't have to manage it or take care to do any special treatment to it at all. So like I said, the main drawbacks to this plant are it will spread if it's happy. It will spread by the stems making roots, and then it'll also spread by overseeding. So in some environments, it might be a little bit of a thug plant, but I think if you know that when you plant it, you can kind of manage it. I will have to say I have not run into that problem in my garden. I find myself dividing this plant and making more of them rather than worrying about them spreading too much. The other drawback to this plant is that it does rot. It is very sensitive to overwatering. So you do have to watch that. If you have a really rainy season for some reason, these plants will suffer. What I did have to do this past winter season is that I noticed that a lot of the leaves were just getting too much moisture. Even though we're in a drought, I think I was overwatering it in the winter season. And so I had to come in and I had to take off all the rotting leaves. And it's pretty gross because they're kind of mushy. And so I just took them all back to stems. And I kind of had the stems about 6 inches long. And then as soon as it was dry and it was hot, they flushed back and they were absolutely beautiful. So you do have to kind of watch it with the water. Like I said, if you're in a very humid area or you don't have very well draining soil, this might not be the plant for you. So having said all that, Helen Von Stein lamb's ear is one of my favorite perennials to have in the garden. I definitely wanted to add this plant into my plant profile playlist because I think it is just so wonderful. Let me know if you guys have any questions about this plant or if there's anything else I can add to these plant profile videos. You all were very helpful giving me tips about things that you wanted to hear about the plants in this video, such as the scientific name, putting the size in centimeters for those of you who aren't in the United States. I didn't even think about that. And then also how to propagate or divide. Oh, that is one thing I will say. You can, if you do get seeds for this, you can grow this plant from seed. I've never tried that, but in all my research, I found that you absolutely can do it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you all can get your hands on this wonderful plant, and I hope you all have a chance to get into your garden today.